All praises to the Most High, Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Raha Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, laboring in His truth in all sincerity. Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 2. And I'll read this in the NLT. Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai says to Edom, I will cut you down to size among the nations. You will be greatly despised.
This is Jennifer Rubin at the Washington Post, somewhat infamous tweet from last year. And she was responding to census data, which showed at the time, and as we've seen this in successive census reports, the number of white people falls for the first time. So she's responding to a headline which says, census data shows widening diversity, number of white people falls for the first time. Jennifer Rubin's response, a more diverse, more inclusive society. This is fabulous news. Now we need to prevent minority white rule. So she is responding specifically to a headline that says the number of white people falls for the first time. She says, fabulous news. Now, if for some reason it's not immediately obvious why that's a horrific thing to say, all you have to imagine is if the headline had said, number of black people falls, and then someone had responded and said, fabulous news. If anyone in media responded that way to the hypothetical headline saying that the number of black people falls, that person would be done forever. Like their career is over, it's destroyed. There would be 100% agreement among everyone everywhere that is very racist. And it would be. This is Jennifer.
So that was Matt Walsh, whom I initially came across on X, formerly known as Twitter. Here's his Twitter profile page here. As you can see, he describes himself as a theocratic fascist. He's a best-selling children's author and a world-renowned DEI consultant. And I'm pretty sure that's sarcasm there. So he has about roughly 3.9 million followers on this particular platform. And he discusses a lot of race issues in this country here. And in that particular video that we just watched, Mr. Walsh here is addressing a comment that a liberal so-called white woman made in regards to the declining white population in this country, in which her statement was, a more diverse, more inclusive society. This is fabulous news. Now we need to prevent minority white rule. And that brings me to the topic of this video. This will be the 6th installment of a 7-part series titled 7 Symptoms of Babylon's Impending Doom, with the focus here being on the changing demographics. And that individual's name was Jennifer Rubin, who stated, a more diverse, more inclusive society. This is fabulous news. Now we need to prevent minority white rule. So her statement came following the latest census numbers, in which the census basically says this is the first time that the white population actually declined. It actually went down. And that's in comparison to the births of every other nation that's here, including the ones who are coming via migration, whether legal or illegal. So her response being, this is fabulous. It just goes to show just how far Esau Edom has fallen. You know, outside of the hardcore far right-wing women who strictly deal with white men, the other half of their liberal white women, they deal with men of other races and ethnicities, sometimes reproducing with them, other times having abortions. Then you factor in a growing number of white men who are moles. They're not even interested in women. Then you factor in the number of white women who have blue hair, tattoos all over their bodies, you know, out of shape, overweight, the type of women that you don't want to introduce to your parents anyway, or you don't want to introduce them to your family anyway. So we can see that the liberal white woman, she's an enemy to the white man. If we're being honest, I'm just keeping it 100 here. If once you start following these trends from an unbiased and objective standpoint, you'll be able to see that the so-called white man, I should say, he's losing his woman. And it just goes to show you how everyone is always in the pursuit of power, because that's exactly what this is. And when a nation is divided, it can't stand. There's plenty of ways to divide a nation. And as it stands here, this is a gender divide. And it's a gender divide with all races and ethnicities in this country. If your family has been here for the past few, I would say 5 to 6 decades since the advent of the feminist movement, but it's still growing, and the gender war between white conservatives versus white liberals has played a significant role in Babylon's impending doom. So let's take a look at Matthew chapter 12 here. In Matthew 12, 25 and 26. Yahushua knew their thoughts and replied, "Any kingdom divided by civil war is doomed. A town or family splintered by feuding will fall apart. And if Satan is casting out Satan, he is divided and fighting himself, and fighting against himself. His own kingdom will not survive." And that's what I was just stating a little earlier regarding the gender war here. And you specifically really see it with the so-called white conservative, male and female, versus the so-called liberal white. And primarily it's the white woman, the white liberal woman, who is 100% working against her own best interest if she knew any better. But across the board, marriage rates are down. That goes for all races, ethnicities in this country. Divorce rates are up across the board as well. But here's where it gets really bad for so-called white people in this country. Let's take a look at this article here I came across. All right, so in this particular article, this is from a website called caringnetwork.com. Doesn't give me the date that this article came out, but this is from caringnetwork.com. Abortion rate by race and demographics in the United States. And I want to scroll down here. Recent statistics show that women of color are more likely to have abortions than white women. Non-Hispanic black women have the highest abortion rate, accounting for over 38% of all abortions in the United States. Non-Hispanic white women come in second place, accounting for over 33% of all abortions. Hispanic women rank third, accounting for 21% of all abortions. Non-Hispanic women of other races, examples, Asians, Native Americans, etc., account for only 7.2% of all abortions. So we see that the non-Hispanic black women, primarily Southern Kingdom women, Judah, Benjamin, Levi, but primarily Judah, accounts for 38% of abortions. In second place is the so-called white woman. She accounts for 33% of all abortions, and then the so-called Hispanic Latino is in third place with 21%. So when Margaret Sanger started Planned Parenthood, it was put into place for the tribes, particularly Judah, She wasn't banking on by the year 2024 or 2025 that 33% of white women would fall into this trap, which leads me to Deuteronomy chapter 30. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 7. And Yahweh, thy power, will put all these curses upon thine enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. And I'll read that also in the NLT. Yahweh, your power, will inflict all these curses on your enemies and all those who hate and persecute you. So everything that was put into place by Esau, Edom to destroy the tribes is actually backfiring on Edom right here in Babylon. So when you look at declining marriage rates, increasing divorce rates, increasing abortions, it's easy to come to that conclusion that it's affecting every race and ethnicity in this country. But the key component in all of this is that it was not supposed to affect whites, especially the middle class and upper class. The system was working the way it was designed to work against the tribes, particularly Judah. But we were never supposed to see white women accounting for 33% of all abortions in this country. That's how it started initially. That's why the first Planned Parenthood clinic was put right smack dead in the middle of Brownsville in Brooklyn, that was, I believe, the mid-40s. They put that right in the middle of a black neighborhood, which was Brownsville. By 2025, you fast forward to 2025, this was not supposed to be white women at 33%. This was primarily supposed to affect Judah. And so you start looking in and you realize that Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 7, the Most High is inflicting our enemies with these same curses that he inflicted us with, that he allowed our enemies to impose on us. So if we take a look at that, that's how it works with those are the actual abortion numbers, right? So let's look at the life expectancy versus median age by race and ethnicity. So this is worlddata.info. This is basically a chart. It shows country on the left, median age in years is the second column from the left. Population under 20 years old is the third column from the left, and to the far right is the life expectancy in years. So we see that. Let's look at Monaco. Monaco has an average age of 56, pretty much 57 years old. They only 17% of their population is under 20, but they still have a relatively high life expectancy, which is 86 years old. But they have an aging population, 56. That means pretty much the average person that you walk across in that country that you come across is 56 years old. Only 20% of their population, only 17% of their population is under the age of 20. So we see Japan, median age is 49, population under 20, 16%. Life expectancy is 84. So you get a kind of a glimpse here of the other countries. Some other countries here: Italy 48, 17, 83, Hong Kong 47, 14, 85, Germany 46, 18, 80. So let's take a look at some of these. Germany, once again, the median age in years is 46. Population under 20 is only 18%. Their life expectancy is 80. Greece 46, 18, 81. Portugal 46, 17, 82. So let's take a look at here. If we scroll down to the US, here we go. So the US has a median age of basically 39 years old, 38.9, you round that up to 39. So the average person that you walk across in the US is basically pushing 40. The population under 20 is only 24.2%. So that's a little bit less than a quarter. And the life expectancy in years is 78.4. So let's compare and contrast that to some of these African nations here. Niger, the median age is 15. That means the average person you walk across in Niger is only 15 years old. 58% of their population is under 20 years old. But they only have a life expectancy of 61 years old. Uganda, 1655-68. Angola, 1655-64. These are all African nations here. And they have very, very young populations in terms of age. And they have a very high population. 58 of their population is under 20. All of these nations here are basically all starting from Nigeria, Cameroon, South Sudan, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, Burgundy, Zambia, Mozambique, Benin. All of these places here, and a lot of these are the Western African countries in Central Africa, which is basically where a large percentage of the tribes are that came across from the transatlantic slave trade. So they have very young populations. Well over half their population is under the age of 20, even though they have relatively short lifespans. 61, 68, 64, 60, 55, starting from the bottom at Niger, right? So we go back and look at the United States, and this counts with everyone in the United States, not just whites. Their median age, once again, is basically 39 years old. Population under 20 is 24.2. Lifespan is basically 78.4. So from there, let's look at what is the average age of whites in the U.S. The average median age of white people in the U.S. is approximately 44 years old, or basically 45 if you round that up. This is significantly higher than the overall U.S. median age of about 39 years old, which we just looked at on that chart, and considerably higher than the median age for other racial and ethnic groups, which is typically in their 30s or younger. The older age structure contributes to a lower birth rate and a higher death rate within the white population compared to other groups. Yes, so actually more whites are dying now than are actually being born in this country. So let's take a look at the average age of blacks in this country. The median age of black people in the U.S. was 32.6, essentially 33 years old in 2023, which is about 6 years younger than the overall U.S. median age. This is because the black population is on average younger than other racial groups, with a higher percentage under the age of 18 compared to non-black Americans. And all of this is freaking white people out. They're getting older, they're having less babies, and everyone else has a relatively younger, their average age is 44. The average white person you come across in this country is 44 years or older. The average black person you come across is 32 years or younger. And that's with everything Babylon has thrown at the southern kingdom here, particularly Judah. You look at abortion clinics all over the place, mass incarceration. You look at just everything, just unjust laws here. Just, when you look at the amount of, if you go to a hospital, most of us can't even afford that insurance, so we're not going to get the level of medical treatment that we need to actually get better. And that's even if you trust going to a doctor. So everything that they've thrown at us, we've pretty much survived that. Judah has pretty much survived that and has maintained a 13% of the population level here. Judah's population has been a steady 13% throughout all of the stuff they put Judah through. It's been a steady 13%. for decades now. Yes, it should be higher when you factor in the amount of abortions black women, get annually. But the key here is the Most High Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai has not allowed it to fall below 13%. We've remained steady, whereas the white population is actually declining. So let's take a look at something that Joe Biden said here. Joe Biden, and this is, if you remember, this was back around 2019 during the presidential campaign, where he said, my overarching objective, if we cannot make significant progress on racial equity, this country is doomed. It is doomed not just because of African Americans, but because by 2040, this country is going to be minority white European. Hear me? Minority white European. And you guys are going to have to start working more with Hispanics, who will make up a larger portion of the population than y'all do in terms of raw numbers. So this is Biden basically signaling the alarm, which he knows what's going on. Even at his old age, he knew, even becoming senile, what the issue was. But, there's a ruling class, there's an elite class above him who actually pulls the strings. So even knowing this, they still flooded the U.S. with migrants from the Ishmaelite nations, the Hamitic nations. Elamites were coming over. So in all of these particular people, they out-reproduce the so-called white man. So let's take a look at Jeremiah 49 and 12. And Jeremiah 49 and 12 says, in the NLT, and this is what Yahweh says, if the innocent must suffer, how much more must you? You will not go unpunished. You must drink this cup of judgment. And that's what's about to happen here. So we're not even having to get into the, Babylon being invaded, the incoming missiles, or any of those type of scriptures. We can see just from looking at the numbers how Esau Edom's family structure has been decimated by white liberal women. They always bring out all of these statistics about Judah's family structure, but they really haven't taken a close look at their very own family structures. Everything that you're doing to Judah particularly is happening to you right here in Babylon. Everything that you try doing to the tribes, first of all, most of the northern tribes they're not messing with abortion clinics, especially the ones who are just now coming over here. They have very tight family units. Now, maybe you might catch a few, of the ones who've been here for decades. They're more likely to fall into that trap than the northern kingdom, who are just now starting to come over here. But when you go back and you start looking at the white liberal women, they don't marry their men, and when they do, they have increased divorce rates. They make up 33% of all abortions in this country, like I stated earlier. And many of them have chosen the career woman path over the traditional wife role. And on a side note, that's the same shit that this so-called black woman does. She learns directly from the liberal white woman. But even with the so-called black woman following in the liberal white woman's footsteps, Judah's numbers have pretty much remained at that 13% that I was mentioning earlier. We're still 13% of the total population. Like I said, that's with mass incarceration. That's with abortion clinics all over the hood. Judah in particular eating unhealthy, medical malpractice. Judah basically being locked out of every institution in this country and having access to zero resources. That's with, Judah being injected with every vaccine at birth, every immunization and vaccine. Some of those things cause autism. But one thing about Judah is going to keep having babies. That's one thing. That's one thing about the Southern Kingdom in general. Judah, Benjamin, and Levi are going to push out babies. That's what we do. We, no matter how bad it gets, Judah is going to have kids. The Southern Kingdom is never going to stop having kids. The same thing with the northern tribes. The Northern Kingdoms always have kids. Esau Edom is a little bit different. As soon as they come up on financial hard times, they stop pushing out babies. They stop. They feel like, hey, we cannot have a child unless us combined we make this amount of money. They stop when things start getting real rough. They stop having kids. That's the difference between Esau and basically every other nation. That's basically the difference. And that's not just the 12 tribes. Every other nation out reproduces Esau. White women basically stop having babies. It all goes back to the feminist movement, but it also factors in, like, once the economy starts going down, they don't push out babies. The 12 tribes, the women of the 12 tribes, regardless of what the economy is, regardless of what they have in their bank accounts, they're going to always have babies. That's what they do. So even with the number of abortion clinics in black neighborhoods and the skyrocketing numbers of abortions that we get, the Most High has kept our numbers as far as Judah right at the 13% level. So, like I said, Judah is holding steady at 13%, and that tells me that a lot of the Most High's elect may be amongst that number. That's why that number never falls below 13%. But it also tells me that the 2/3 among them as well, they're being held off for that final judgment. So, you got to factor in both sides there as to why, whatever the Most High's reasons are for basically keeping Judah at this particular number here. That's just something I've noticed over the past few decades, is that this number is always at 13%, no matter, what happens, in this country regarding the Southern Kingdom. But let's compare and contrast that with Edom here in Babylon. His numbers are actually decreasing as his median age increases, which means only half your women are having babies, but the other ones who still want to have kids, they're already approaching that age where they can't. So I would venture to say that as it pertains to Babylon's impending doom, the liberal white woman is a strong MVP candidate here. I mean, she has definitely played her position. And that position, was actually appointed to her by the Most High Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. So just like the so-called black woman works against the black man here, the liberal white woman who votes like abortion rights is the single greatest issue of our time. She's betrayed actually the white man in this country tremendously, and that's why I say she's a strong candidate for MVP here when this whole thing collapses. The difference between blacks and whites here in Babylon is blacks were never, though, on top. This was our captivity. This was a punishment for us. Whereas white men, they were actually on top here, but their women wanted more power. That's what I mentioned earlier in this particular video. Their women wanted more power. White women did not like the fact that white men gave black men the right to vote before them. Black men went straight from plantations to being able to vote. They didn't like the fact that black men were given the right to be property owners before them as well. So they rebelled. The feminist movement that was brought upon by small hats, they basically offered the white woman that, offer her that fruit, so to speak. And she took it. And pretty much the so-called white man has been, generation by generation, it's been about maybe 3 generations since the feminist movement, they've been losing their power structure in this country. And a lot of it has to do with them being able to maintain their family structure. So let's scroll down here. Let's go to Jeremiah 16. just to kind of, let's start at 15. This is pretty much what was just read at the beginning of this video with Obadiah chapter 1, verse 2. So this is Jeremiah 59, verse 15 and 16. Yahweh says to Edom, I will cut you down to size among the nations. You will be despised by all. Right. As much as whites talk about, as much as these so-called whites talk about, they got black fatigue and all. This is how you know they don't read the scriptures. They don't understand what's in the scriptures, because the scripture here clearly says, I will cut you down to size among the nations. You will be despised by all. So everyone has Edom fatigue right about now. You even ask some of these people, if you ever talk to some of them that's migrating over here and you ask, hey, why are so many people coming over here? And they'll tell you, hey, man, if y'all would stop bombing us for a damn 2 weeks, we can stay in our own country. Y'all bomb us so much we don't have any place to go. Then y'all invite us here as refugees, only to say y'all don't want us here. And it's the truth, man. I mean, I get it. I get how they feel. And it's one of those things where, like the scripture here says, I will cut you down to size among the nations. You will be despised by all. And so as Edom's size is actually declining here in this country, not just his size, but his stature. Like no one really, the type of, at one time in this country, you got nervous when you walked, especially if you're going back to the 1910s, the 20s, the 30s, back into the 1800s. You were nervous if you were a so-called black person in this country. You were nervous if you walked past whites. You were nervous. No one feels that way about them anymore. They don't have that they don't put that fear, that aura that they had. They no longer have that. The only people who are still sweating white people are some of these damn Negro bedwenches out here that still make videos talking about, I want to get me a white man and all this. Those are the delusional ones there. No one is really paying attention to anything that so-called white people are doing anymore outside of the Negro bedwench. But let's see. You look at, like I was mentioning just now, all these nations that start coming into the country, right? You look at the Ishmaelites, people of Middle Eastern descent. A lot of them coming from the Islamic nations, right? Those women are not going to stop having babies. Those men live by whatever Sharia law they go by, tells them they can have 2 or 3 wives. They be having like 6, 7 kids with each one of those wives. So all of them are out reproducing Edom here in this country. Same thing with Elam. Elam out reproduces Edom by a long shot. All of these Hamites you're bringing over, same thing with them. They all out reproduce Edom. These nations like Moab, China, Ham, a lot of those African nations, Elam, all of those countries, all of those nations have well over 1 billion people. I think China has 1.5 to 1.8 or something like that. Or maybe they might have already have 2 billion. I might be confusing them with Elam. China, I believe, has 2 billion. Elam has 1.5 billion. Ham just hit the billion mark. And then you have Edom all over the world, not just the U.S., but Edom all over the world is only like 8 to 10% of the entire world's population at something like 800 million. So it's not just here where the Most High is cutting them down to size. It's all over the world. And so let's go down to verse 16. You have been deceived by the fear you inspire in others and by your own pride. You live in a rock fortress and control the mountain heights. But even if you make your nest among the peaks like eagles, with the eagles, I will bring you crashing down, says Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. And that's exactly what he's doing. Every single time throughout history where Esau, Edom built up a kingdom, the Most High knocked that shit down. And he's going to do it one final time right here in this particular last captivity that we're in. And basically, going back to Edom, Edom has basically tried to destroy Judah right here. The southern kingdom in its entirety, they still fuck with Levi. They still fuck with Benjamin. But they really have been after Judah for these past 400 years. I mean, they've been going at Judah hard, man, throwing everything at Judah. Back in 1910, Judah had 16 to 19 million acres of farmland. Esau, Edom has used every single, understand that was 16 to 19 million acres of farmland. Judah was basically self-sufficient after slavery. Judah was building their own universities. Judah was building their own churches. Judah had their own little communities, and these devils basically took all of that. You know, they used all types of property tax laws and shit, man, land theft by the USDA, all kind of shit, man, was just taking Judah's land, took all their farmland, basically made Judah completely reliant on the government. You know, a lot of times I hear people say, oh, the so-called black American is lazy. He says, after a while, motherfucker, keep taking everything from you. You ain't going to keep working to get that shit back just to want to take it again. Eventually, mentally, you going to kind of check out like, oh, man, no matter what the fuck we do, they going to just keep taking this shit. Now, I'm not saying that's not an excuse to just be a lazy motherfucker out here and not do anything, but I kind of, being a Judite myself, I kind of understand the mentality. When you got 16 and 19 million acres of farmland, and these devils can draw up any type of legislation they want to take your shit. You know, they can start coming up with any type of property tax to take your shit. Eventually, you ain't gonna be wanting to get up here and go to work either. Eventually, you gonna get tired of it. Like, yo, but basically, man, these dudes, they've thrown everything at Judah, from taking land like that, from burning down whole communities, putting abortion clinics all over the place in our neighborhoods. Whatever neighborhoods we do get in, they gentrify those particular neighborhoods. Just fucked up educational curriculums and shit that shouldn't even be taught in these schools they're teaching. And then they give you fucked up books, outdated books and shit, outdated fucking computer programs and shit. There's all kind of fucked up ways that this devil has really tried to stick it to Judah, man. I'm like I said earlier, man, even with that C-19 jab, that the first people they went after with that was the tribes. They put Judah faces all over the damn news and shit to promote that shit. And a lot of stupid ass Judites go for it, but like I said, they've tried everything they could to bring Judah down here. They were completely uncompassionate towards Judah, but the Most High has maintained Judah's population at 13%. So that lets me know that the Most High has big plans here. So with that being said, I'm going to end this with Obadiah 1:18. In Obadiah 1:18. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble. And they shall kindle in them, and devour them. And there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for Yahweh Bashem and Hawashai have spoken it. I pray this has been edifying and reaches the ears it's supposed to reach. Shalom.